Good afternoon. My name is Austin Bragg, and I will be discussing today about why were anti-literacy laws passed in the South. Here's our table of contents. I'm going to have a brief introduction. We'll talk about a historical context, talk about the rise of anti-literacy laws, the philosophical perspective, literacy as a tool of empowerment, racial paternalism, and then I would conclude it with final remarks. As an introduction, anti-literacy laws in the South were passed primarily in the aftermath of the Civil War and the Reconstruction era. However, this does date back to the Nat Turner Rebellion in 1831 and the Margaret Douglas trial in the mid-1850s. This was rooted in both historical events and philosophical ideologies that sought to maintain the racial hierarchy and preserve control over the African American population. These laws were not simply a product of fear or prejudice, but were part of a deliberate effort to maintain social, economic, and political dominance in the wake of significant changes brought about the emancipation and the expansion of the rights of African American civil rights. With the abolition of slavery and the enfranchisement of African Americans during this time period, it heavily weighed in on the southern plantation owners who gained their wealth off the backs of African American slaves. So the South, obviously wanting to maintain their wealth, had to come up with some kind of changes or adaptations to the African American rights in order to preserve what they tried to continue doing as far as their plantation lifestyle and their wealth due to it. From a historical context, to understand why anti-literacy laws were passed, it is important to look at the historical context of the post-Civil War South. After the Civil War ended in 1865, the southern states found themselves in a dramatic state of upheaval. The institution of slavery, which had been the backbone of the southern economy and social structure, was abolished. Freedmen, formerly enslaved African Americans, were now free citizens, and the federal government was attempting to integrate them into society through Reconstruction policies. And this includes the establishment of schools, the granting of voting rights, etc. However, this transformation posed a direct threat to racial and power structures in the South. White Southerners, particularly those in positions of power, feared that educating African Americans would empower them both politically and economically. By learning to read and write, African Americans could gain access to information. They could organize and ultimately challenge the deeply entrenched system of segregation and disenfranchisement that had developed after slavery. In response to many fears, the southern states passed laws that specifically prohibited the teaching of reading and writing to enslaved people, and later to free African Americans, or imposed severe restrictions on such activities. These anti-literacy laws, which were sometimes explicit and at other times enforced through violence or intimidation, were designed to limit African Americans' ability to participate fully in society. For example, in many southern states, it became illegal for African Americans to learn to read or write, with teachers and students risking severe punishment if caught. From a philosophical standpoint, these laws reflected deeply ingrained beliefs about race, power, and human potential. The Southern elite upheld a racist ideology that denied African Americans their humanity and intelligence. The very notion of literacy, often associated with personal empowerment and freedom, and was seen as dangerous in the hands of those who were perceived as inferior. Educating African Americans was viewed as an attempt to disrupt the social order, which relied on the idea of white supremacy. Philosophically, literacy can be understood as both a tool of empowerment and a vehicle for self-determination. By denying African Americans these rights to education, white Southerners sought to prevent them from achieving autonomy or asserting their rights. The power of knowledge was perceived as a direct threat to the continued subjugation of African Americans. In essence, literacy was not only a skill, but also a symbol of independence and resistance, and for that reason it was viewed with fear and hostility. The Southern elites also believed in the concept of racial paternalism, the idea that white people had an obligation to care for and control African Americans, who were seen as incapable of managing their own lives without oversight. To them, keeping African Americans in a state of illiteracy was justified by their belief that such knowledge could lead to rebellion or social instability. They subscribed to a philosophy that dehumanized African Americans, reducing them to a status that necessitated control, whether through legal means or social exclusion. In sum, anti-literacy laws in the South were a direct response to political, economic, and social upheaval caused by the end of slavery and the potential threat that an educated African American population posed to the existing power structures. Historically, they were a reactionary effort to preserve white dominance and suppress any challenges to the racial hierarchy. Philosophically, these laws reflected deeply held beliefs about race, power, and the role of knowledge in maintaining social order. By preventing African Americans from becoming literate, the South sought to maintain its system of racial control and deny African Americans the opportunity to fully participate in freedoms promised by the nation. Thank you.